So the judge in your case, for whatever reason, who knows what was going through their head, decided not to rescue a young girl who had been subject to terrible, terrible abuse. Any other ethnicity, faith group, whatever, as you said, you would have been pulled straight out and put into care. There is no question around that. Does this come back to the concept of law, of the entrenched system of Sharia law, and that even though in every Western democracy, just as in Australia, canon law, the law of the Catholic Church, should not be above common law. So, the law of the Australian government is the law of the Australian people, whatever faith you're at. So it seems to me that is it fear? Is it fear of backlash? Is it timidity? I mean, what anecdotally, what are people in your network telling you about that?
Well, I had a lot of people who read my book who confided in me that they used to work as social workers. That used to be their career. And they had to walk away from children like me so many times, or children from the Aboriginal community, or,
Yeah.
any child that was non-white had to be left in their abusive circumstances for the sake of cultural relativity. And
Right. Right.
the people
Yeah.
that were
That's a
contacting me were genuinely haunted, Gemma, haunted by
mm-mm.
the faces of these kids that they had to say, no, sorry, we can't help you. We're just going to leave you in the situation that you're in, knowing full well that if that child had blue eyes and blonde hair, that they would be able to save that kid from the abuse that they were living under. So it was just too
So that,
difficult for a
yeah.
lot of these people, and they have to actually change careers because there's no way to change that system.
So that's incredibly important, because in the last couple of years here in Australia, we've been having the same conversation around Indigenous children, particularly in the Northern Territory, where there have been some absolutely horrendous cases of abuse, toddlers being sexually assaulted so badly that they ended up in hospital, high degree of STDs amongst young children. And there is this tiptoeing around the issue of removing a child, and it's this concept of why can't we be colorblind in relation to the welfare of a child? Why can't we simply be brave enough? Why can't leaders simply be brave enough to say it doesn't matter what ethnicity, what race group, what color that child's skin is? As you've said, if that child was blonde hair and blue eyed, it would be out of that at risk situation, in 30 seconds flat. So it seems as if this concept of racism is actually very, very deep in the heart of the issues that you're trying to confront. It's just a
A
different
hundred percent.
manifestation. Racism that we've grown up to see and to understand is the racism that resulted in the death of a man in America this week, right? It's the racism that denied people of any color, any ethnicity. In Australia, it was Indigenous Australians, obviously. Then as the post-war migrant wave came through, as Greeks, Italians, Chinese, Vietnamese, denied them work, denied them housing, opportunity, social advancement, that kind of racism. We've never had a discussion around the racism that keeps a woman or a child confined to a situation that would not be tolerated for a child who was not of color.
And the difference is this new racism is so much more insidious because it's coming from people who are insisting that they are the virtuous ones, that they are so
Mm.
anti-racism. And that's why the perfect way, the perfect microcosm of this is how our prime minister has like three images of him throughout the years where he was covered in blackface. So that is the
Yeah.
person that is insisting that he is so not racist and is constantly admonishing the Canadian public for being racist. So, that's the thing. Like as somebody who has received racism from both sides, I can tell you that at least when it's somebody who is, as you know, a white supremacist type of person, they are direct. They are honest. They are angry at me for marrying a white man. They are angry at me for
Right.
ruining his bloodline and having a child that is mixed. You know, they're direct, at least. They are at least direct. But when I have somebody from the left being racist to me, it is so much more insidious and it's so much more slippery and it's so much harder to put your finger on and to allow them to see how what they are doing is so much worse than what's even coming from this side. Because at least from what's coming from the other side, I can see it coming. I understand it and it makes sense to me. But from the left, they have like this armor that they have created for themselves to they believe that they are the virtuous ones. They believe that they are the non-racist ones. And then they do things like what that judge did, which is to be incredibly, severely, disgustingly, viciously racist towards me. And that's just my experience, right? Like all of the girls that are suffering from FGM and no parents have ever been prosecuted. What about those girls? If, again, I have to say it, if a white family took a razor blade to their daughter's genitals, those parents would not be free people today. They would be considered sociopaths and they would be behind bars. And when you talk about being colorblind, when we're talking about protecting children, the law is for everybody. It's one law for all. Why is one child more valuable than another child? You know, they think that, I don't understand how their minds work, that they think that it's better to leave a child in a abusive, in a sexually assaulting family. Like, how is that ever, how do they sleep at night?
No. Well, they don't have conversation. This is coming sort of not full circle, but it links into what we're talking about, because these conversations are not freely had and they're not honestly had. They're had with a timidity and they're had within the context of, it's cultural. I mean, my father was Italian. He's from the north of Italy, slightly more liberal. Culturally more liberal than the south of Italy. But I remember growing up in my early careers in my 20s, and there was a young girl who worked with me in the first job that I had in a newsroom, and she was from a Sicilian family, very traditional Italian family. She was in her 20s. She was an adult. She was working. She was not allowed to leave the house on weekends unless her brother supervised her. She was not allowed to, basically live an adult life as a young woman in her 20s without the constant supervision of a male relative. Now, that's an extreme example of what used to happen. Very, very. I mean, it's an extreme example of Italian Catholic culture. Right. But I remember we all tiptoed around it. And I'm not suggesting there was any harm perpetrated on her. To be honest, I wouldn't know. But I remember thinking, oh, my God, how, it's whatever, it was 1990, whatever at the time. And she's in her 20s and she's working and she still hasn't got the freedom to go out for dinner on a Friday night unless there's a bloke with her. And those are the conversations that are always treated with timidity. They're treated with they're treated with timidity and they're treated with fear because we're afraid of, to your point about identity politics, Yasmine, we're afraid of being called, you're a racist, you are Islamophobe, you are anti-Semitic, you are all of these things. To say that, it is not right that the Hasidic community should not educate young women, to say it is not right for young Hasidic Jewish women to be confined to a life of no choice, no education, all of that kind of thing. You are labeled. Perhaps as a community, we need to gird our loins, Yasmine. We need to get some courage up to be able to face those labels and say, no, I'm not. It's just that they tend to those loud voices tend to shout.
And that's the only answer. That's the only way to solve this, is for people to just be strong and to just continue talking. And, an extreme example of what happens when you don't continue talking is the rape gangs in the UK. Those rape gangs were only allowed to continue. They perpetuated for so many years, and thousands of girls across the country, some girls as young as 11, Why? How did that happen? The answer is because the authorities were too scared to speak up. So, because they're afraid that people might call them bad words, instead, because what they're trading that for, they're saying, I'll protect myself from somebody calling me bad words. And therefore, you're empowering, you're allowing that girl to get raped. That's what people don't understand is when you are silenced, there's a cost to that. When jihadis go around and they murder the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists, and then it causes you to bite your tongue because you don't want to criticize Islam, or what they did to Salman Rushdie, or et cetera, there's so many cases of them getting angry at criticism. But if you bite your tongue, then they have achieved their goal. They have succeeded. You are allowing them to win. And what's worse is you're empowering and you are allowing that oppression to continue. And you know what? It reaches you. It's not just over there. We can't just look at Afghani girls and Saudi girls and Iranian girls and say, oh, that's happening over there. That's not happening over here. I'm born and raised in Canada. I know girls from Australia that were put in niqab, covering their faces from the age of 10 and 11 years old. Girls that today will speak with an accent because they only went to Islamic schools and they didn't even get to interact with the wider Australian community. These are the kinds of things that they're happening now. They're happening here in your own backyard. And we know this, right? Like we know when ISIS started up their caliphate, there were people from all over the planet burning their passports and going and joining them. We don't have the luxury anymore of saying it's none of our business. It's happening over there. No, it is our business. These are our girls. These are our neighbors. They are in our schools. They are friends with our children. You know, we have every right to get involved in this conversation. And I think that's really what it comes down to is people feel like it's none of my business. It's their community. But that's a very selfish way to look at the world around you. If I see a child being hurt, I'm not going to wonder to myself, oh, but what community is that child from and what kind of backlash could I receive from it? You need to speak up for people.